Alquist, Anderson, Berryhill, Blakesley, Calderon, Canella, Corbett, Correa, De Leon, DeSaulnier, Dutton, Emerson, Evans, Fuller, Gaines, Hancock, Harmon, Hernandez, Huff, Kehoe, LaMalfa, Leno, Ted Lieu, Carol Liu, Lowenthal, Negrete McLeod, Padilla, Pavley, Price, Rubio, Runner, Smidian, Steinberg, Strickland, Vargas, Walters, Wolk, Wright, Weiland, Yee.
There's an absence of a quorum. Members, please come to the floor. All right. One down and another one down. Up to 19. Guests beyond the rail and in the gallery, please rise. We will be led in prayer this morning by our guest chaplain, the Honorable Rod Wright.
Members and guests, today we celebrate the life of civil and human rights leader, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. One of the often overlooked aspects of Dr. King's life is how much he accomplished in such a short time. Dr. King was born on January 15, 1929 in Atlanta, Georgia. He was assassinated on April 4, 1968 in Memphis, Tennessee at the age of 39. Sadly, Robert Kennedy was assassinated just 2 months later on June 5th during his victory celebration after winning the California primary in Los Angeles, California at the Ambassador Hotel. 1968 was also the year of the Olympics in Mexico City, where my good friends Tommy Smith and John Carlos held their black glove-fisted protest. Last year on October 16, 2011, President Obama dedicated a monument to the King family on the tidal basin of the National Mall in Washington, D.C. This is the only monument on the National Mall honoring someone other than a president or a war memorial. The dedication had to be rescheduled because of two rare events in Washington, a hurricane and an earthquake. President Obama said an earthquake and a hurricane may have delayed this day, but it was a day not to be denied. The symbolism of Dr. King's memorial being on the National Mall is that it represents a triumphant return to the site of one of his more famous demonstrations. The August 28, 1963 March on Washington, where he delivered the legendary "I Have a Dream" message. Incidentally, the actual monument is the work of a Chinese artist, Li Xin. Another often overlooked aspect of Dr. King's life was that he was not only a gifted orator, but also a skilled organizer and visionary leader. I mentioned that Dr. King was a young man at the time of his death. However, he recognized he was not a one-man band and frequently relied on others who are commonly unsung. Today, I'd like to lift the names of a couple of those unsung heroes without whom the movement may have taken a different course. The March on Washington, for example, was organized by Bayard Rustin, a labor leader and close associate of the union representing the Pullman car porters, A. Philip Randolph. It was Rustin who conceived the idea of the march and then recruited King to speak. The FBI considered Rustin a subversive because he was a black, gay, and a communist. He was also brilliant. When President Kennedy and the FBI prevailed on King to cancel the march and renounce Rustin, he said, absolutely not. And the rest is history. By the way, it was Rustin who directed King to be a follower of Gandhi. We often hear of the work of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. We seldom hear the name of Reverend Fred Shuttlesworth, who was one of its founders and on the front lines in Atlanta, in Birmingham, Alabama. Having to confront the infamous Eugene Bull Connor, the racist director of public safety in Birmingham. Unlike Dr. King, Shuttlesworth was not a believer in nonviolence. However, he and King made a great team, like a good guy, bad guy duo. Reverend Shuttlesworth died October of 2011 at the age of 89. Congressman John Lewis said of him, when others did not have the courage to stand up and speak out, Fred Shuttlesworth put all he had on the line to end segregation in Birmingham, Alabama. At the time of the Civil Rights Act being introduced, President Kennedy said, but for Birmingham, we would not be here today. Another major event in the movement was the famous Montgomery bus boycott of 1955. That boycott was launched when Ms. Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat to a white passenger on a public bus. She was arrested and charged with a crime. Dr. King used this incident to organize a boycott of the bus system in Montgomery, which lasted some 385 days. To sustain the boycott, the churches in the city of Montgomery organized transportation routes and carpools, which financially crippled the system. The mayor of Montgomery actually ordered the traffic tickets be given to the carpools to try to break the boycott. The boycott ended with a Supreme Court ruling ending segregation on public accommodations and reversed the charges against Ms. Parks. Today, we refer to her as the mother of the civil rights movement. And just this past November in San Diego, at the General Dynamics NASSCO shipbuilding facility, the United States Navy launched the USS Medgar Evers. His widow, Merle Evers, christened the ship in the name of her husband, with their children and grandchildren and thousands of witnesses looking on. Medgar Evers was assassinated on June 12, 1963, in the driveway of his home in Mississippi. Mr. Evers was the leader of the NAACP in Mississippi and was conducting voter registration drives in the state. A military veteran, Medgar Evers is buried in Arlington Cemetery. From Viola Luiso, a white woman who was a Teamster, the wife of a Teamster leader from Detroit, who was murdered in Selma, Alabama, March 25, 1965, to college students James Chaney of Mississippi, Andrew Goodman, a Jewish kid from New York, and Michael Swerner, also from New York, murdered together on June 21, 1964, in Philadelphia, Mississippi. Ralph Abernathy and United Automobile Workers, Walter Reuther. This movement was bigger than one human being. It was bigger than one man. It was even bigger than one country. Lech Walesa of Poland and Nelson Mandela of South Africa credit Martin Luther King with much of their success. Members, today I just want to say that Dr. King was the leader of a movement that grew more powerful with his assassination. The movement is why Curran and I are here today, and is why President Obama is President of the United States. Bullets can kill dreamers, but they don't kill the dream. God of our weary years, God of our silent tears, thou who hast brought us thus far on the way, thou who hast by thy might led us into the light, let us forever the path we pray. Lest our feet stray from the places, our God, where we met thee, lest our hearts, drunk with the wine of the world, we forget thee. Shadowed beneath thy hand, may we forever stand, true to our God, true to our native land. May this be God's will. Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Reverend Wright, for that inspiring prayer. Privileges of the floor, members. Senator McLeod.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, I would like to announce 2 additions to the McLeod campaign team. Ava Lynn and Anna V. Lopez are my 2 newest great-granddaughters. They were born on January 5th, 2012. For those of you who are keeping score, these are great-grandkids number 19 and 20.
All right.
Please join me in welcoming them to the great state of California.
Thank you, Senator McLeod. Job well done. Senator Gaines, for what purpose do you rise?
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to make an announcement that we will continue our Bible studies, and we're going to have actually two opportunities on Wednesdays at 8 o'clock at the Assembly Rules Committee room, and that is Wednesday morning, and then at noon in my office, and that's led by Frank Erb, and everybody's invited. We'd love to have you there. Great opportunity to have a time to reflect and hopefully learn something. So thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Huff.
Mr. President, I request SB 632 be removed from the consent calendar at the request of Senator Emerson.
Yeah. Without objection.
Thank you.
Any other privileges at this time? Messages from the governor will be deemed read. Senator Berryhill, what purpose do you rise, sir?
For adjourned memory?
You may. What?
Thank you, members. I rise and adjourn in memory of a very close friend, died recently, Matt Bruno. Passed away surrounded by his family on September 19th, 2011, in Modesto, California. Matt was born in Akron, Ohio on December 23rd, 1943. In 1946, at the age of 3, him and his family moved to Ripon. Growing up in Ripon, he farmed peaches, almonds, grapes with his father Tony and his two brothers Joe and Ed. Matt graduated from Ripon High School in 1961. In 1966, he left the family farming operation and bought La Loma Liquors in Modesto, where really he made his first money. Matt married Barbara Claypool in 1967, and together they owned and operated La Loma Liquors until they sold the business in 1972. Matt then purchased Turlock Appliance Center, and 1 year later purchased Miller Dairy Supply. In 1974, he merged two companies to form Turlock Dairy and Refrigeration Incorporated with Turlock Dairy and Refrigeration. Matt focused the business on dairy construction, dairy equipment, and dairy refrigeration, and he loved all things agriculture and owned several other agriculture-related businesses throughout the years. Throughout their 40-year marriage, Matt and Barbara enjoyed traveling together and entertaining their many friends at their home. Matt loved his gardening at home and sharing the bounty with everybody and everyone. He was quite an entertainer. He was generous in every aspect of life, always ready to give to someone in need, whether they be in need of money, food.
Excuse me, Senator. Members, let's please have some courtesy to our colleague.
Money, food, time, or drink. You can't walk on one leg was one of his famous last sayings when leaving his house, and many times, I must say, I was walking on 3. It was Matt would say when we tried to leave his house after having only one glass of wine. He was the most generous host and loved being surrounded by people. In fact, his greatest joy was spending time with his family and friends and his 3 grandchildren. Matt was preceded in death by his parents, Tony and Martha, and his brother, Joe. He is survived by his wife, Barbara, his son, Tony, and Matthew, and his 3 grandchildren, Francisca, Mateo, and Rocco. So he was a great friend. He was a pillar in the economy and in our area. And I want to thank everybody for joining me in joining his memory.
Thank you, Senator Berryhill. If you'll bring the name forward so that we may properly memorialize that fine Californian in the records of our state. I'm ready.
And so I'll call you at your desk. Good morning, members. Messages from the governor will be deemed read. Also, messages from the Assembly will be deemed read, and reports of committees will be deemed read, and those amendments adopted. And now we'll go to Senator Price at his desk. Senator Price, we're under motions and resolutions now.
Yes, Madam President, thank you very much. I'm proud to present Senate Resolution 23, which recognizes the life and legacy of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. As we all know, Dr. King was not only a champion for racial equality, but an ardent advocate for social and economic justice.
Mr. Price, we are going to take up this item without reference to file, so the Secretary will read and then we'll return to you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Senate Resolution 23 by Senator Price relative to Martin Luther King Jr. Day.
Without objection, Senator Price.
Thank you, Madam President. The contribution of Dr. Martin Luther King to the history of our great nation and to the civil rights movement has been well documented and preserved for generations to come. Among these contributions is the Poor People's Campaign, which he organized along with the Southern Christian Leadership Conference to address the economic disparities that existed in our country at that time. In many respects, the issues of Dr. King and his supporters tackled in the 50s and 60s to remain prevalent today: poverty, unemployment, income disparities, homelessness, school achievement gaps. However, we can also celebrate the many achievements that we as Americans have achieved together, taking us even closer to the dream that Dr. King envisioned nearly 45 years ago. Next week, our nation observes Dr. King's birthday, and I encourage all to think about the great legacy that he left behind: a legacy of tolerance, racial harmony, and hope. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Members, is there debate or discussion on the item? Any debate or discussion? Seeing none. Members, we're going to take this up on a voice vote. All those in favor say aye. Is there any opposed? The ayes carry the measure. Thank you, Senator Price. Members, we're going to continue on here to introduction and first reading of bills. They'll be deemed read. Consideration of the daily file. We're going to go to the Secretary is going to read the second reading.
Senate Bill 804 and Assembly Bill 272 with amendments.
Those are deemed read, and we will go to governor's appointments, item 63. Members, governor's appointments. Senator Steinberg, governor's appointments. Senator Steinberg.
Thank you very much, Madam President. These are... Thank you. Thank you, Madam President. These are the nominations of Art Carter as the chair and Ed Lowry as a member of the Occupational Safety and Health Appeals Board. Both of these gentlemen who have been in and around the legislature in various capacities for many years were heard in the Rules Committee earlier in the week and were approved on bipartisan votes of 5-0. We had a very robust hearing. I think my colleagues on the Rules Committee will agree, where we explored a whole host of issues relating to workplace safety, and I think we're very lucky that both Mr. Carter and Mr. Lowry have chosen to continue public service and devoting themselves to these important issues. I urge an aye vote.
Or discussion, members? Seeing none, Secretary, please call the roll.
Alquist. Aye. Anderson. Aye. Berryhill. Aye. Blakesley. Calderon. Canella. Aye. Corbett. Aye. Correa. Aye. De Leon. Aye. DeSaulnier. Aye. Dutton. Emerson. Evans. Aye. Fuller. Aye. Gaines. Aye. Hancock. Harmon. Aye. Hernandez. Aye. Huff. Aye. Kehoe. Aye. LaMalfa. Aye. Leno. Aye. Ted Lieu. Aye. Carol Lieu. Aye. Lowenthal. Negrete McLeod. Aye. Padilla. Aye. Pavley. Aye. Price.
Aye.
Aye. Rubio. Aye. Runner. Semidian. Steinberg. Aye. Strickland. Aye. Vargas. Walters. Wolk. Wright. Aye. Wyland. Yee. Yee, aye.
Ayes 28, no 0. The
Vargas, aye.
Ayes 29, no 0. The appointment is confirmed. Okay. Consideration of the daily file. We've done that already. Okay, returning to motions and resolutions. Senator DeSaulnier.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to adjourn in memory of Farrell Bud Stewart. Mr. Stewart was the city manager of the city of Concord beginning in 1960 and ending in 1994. He went to the University of California at Berkeley, got his degree in engineering in 1947. He grew up in Coalinga after he was born in Fresno. Bud actually introduced me to this building and this room many years ago when I first got elected to the city council, and he was a city manager, and we sat right in the back. We were probably complaining about the legislature taking away local funds. He was a truly remarkable man, unpretentious, modest in his way, served in one jurisdiction for all of those years. Before he served as city manager, he was a city engineer. Before that, he served in World War II with distinction. He served in the Battle of the Bulge and also was involved in crossing into Germany before he was wounded and sent home. He's survived by 3 sons, 3 daughters, and 13 grandchildren, and I would appreciate it if the Senate adjourned in his memory.
Thank you, Senator DeSaulnier. If you'll bring the name forward so that we may properly memorialize this great Californian. Senator Yee, for what purpose do you rise?
For the purpose of adjourn in memory. It is with great sadness that I alert the body of the passing of Walter Johnson yesterday afternoon. Walter was the Secretary-Treasurer of the San Francisco Labor Council. He was first elected in 1985, and when he was elected, he indicated that what he was going to do was to restore labor as conscience of the city and county of San Francisco. Many of us had the distinct pleasure of being mentored by Walter. One of the things that he did was he was a father figure to so many of us, meaning that oftentimes he would sit in the audience, he would not say a word, but that look that he gave you, you knew exactly what you had to do. And it is that kind of relationship that he had and influence that he had to legions of electeds and other individuals that made him such a tremendous force in the city and county of San Francisco and in the Bay Area. While he was the executive director of the San Francisco Labor Council, he was a resident of San Mateo County. But one of the things that impressed me about Walter was that he was an impeccable dresser, but if he needed to, he would rough it up with anybody. He had no problems at the moment's notice of walking a picket line, and if he had to be arrested, he was more than happy to be arrested. So he was really an individual for everyone. For those individuals who knew him, it is a tremendous loss because we will not see that look, but I'm sure that that look is always going to be in our heart. So with that, I want to adjourn in his memory. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Yee. Please bring forward the name of this great labor leader so that we may properly memorialize him in our records. Senator Padilla, for what purpose do you rise, sir?
Mr. President, request to speak on condition of the file.
Without objection.
Thank you. Mr. President, members, good morning. I want to take just a minute to talk about redevelopment. Most of us are aware of the recent Supreme Court decision on the challenges to AB 1X26 and 27 from last year's budget. And last week it was reported that I intended to introduce urgency legislation to postpone some of the deadlines established by the Supreme Court in their ruling, including but not limited to the February 1st disillusionment deadline for redevelopment agencies. And that was true. But I think in the course of the last week, I know I've heard, I believe many of you and your staff have heard, of a number of issues that have been raised in the city's efforts to comply with the February 1st deadlines and other requirements of the legislation and of the court ruling. Issues including the possibility that the state of California not only gains assets from redevelopment agencies, but an uncertain amount of liability from those very agencies as well, to the tune of multi-million, if not billions, of dollars. Liabilities that could impede our efforts to generate additional revenues for school funding. That was the goal in the budget actions that we took last year. Other issues include the potential or probable layoffs of thousands of employees, not just of the redevelopment agencies, but of construction workers who are working on projects that may be jeopardized or compromised through the disillusionment of redevelopment as we know it, and the almost guaranteed mass litigation that could be realized throughout the state. Recognizing these issues and issues that need to be addressed and worked through, regardless of if there's an extension of time for redevelopment agencies or we develop any other alternative economic development framework for local government, I've partnered with Senator Rubio to present SB 659, which would push back the dissolution date of redevelopment agencies to April 15th of 2012. A little bit of delay, but not a whole lot of time, so that we don't compromise monies that are realized to the state, but give ourselves a little bit of breathing room to address some of these very specific, some of these very technical issues. A hearing date has yet to be set for the bill. In fact, the language will be going across the desk later this morning. But I know many of you, as you've told me, are hearing from your local government officials and a lot of your constituents about what's going on with redevelopment. I believe that failure to act quickly to address some of these very real questions could undermine the work that we did last year on the budget. We need to make sure that our actions from the budget are net revenues to the state and public education and not net costs to the state, and certainly that we don't want to delay the payments to public schools. That's not what we intended last year. So I look forward to working with all of you to address these issues, to make sure that the state doesn't end up getting saddled with unintended additional fiscal obligations and that public schools receive their funding. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. Any other motions? Well, members, on behalf of the California Legislative Black Caucus, we hope you will accept the poster that we provided that depicts the new monument, the new King Monument in Washington, D.C., certainly a symbol for us all of the life and legacy. And we also invite you to visit the Rotunda to view an exhibit honoring Dr. Martin Luther King and his great service to our country. If there's no other business, Senator Steinberg, the desk is clear.
Thank you. Mr. President, a session will resume at 2 o'clock on Tuesday. I wish everyone a happy and meaningful Martin Luther King Day. May the weekend and Monday be a day we recommit ourselves to the principles that Dr. King stood for. Have a great weekend, everybody.
The Senate will be in recess until 3:30, at which time the adjournment motion will be made. We will reconvene at Tuesday at 2 p.m. Thank you.